So this section will be going through the sort of implementation stages of the initiative. So the first question I wanted to ask is, what type of wearable technology did you introduce and what data does it monitor?
So we've got three different technologies that we're trialing. The first one, which is linked to our visitor system controller contractors, is linked to your phone. So whilst it's not technically wearable, most people carry it around as much as they would anything else. And the data that we're looking at is geo-positioning. We have it linked and geo-fenced to the site itself, so that it doesn't go beyond the workplace. And for us, it's really important that we separate what's happening at work versus what's happening at home for anyone. The nice thing with having it linked to a phone is if someone is, they need to go somewhere, need to do something, they don't want us to track it, they can switch that side off on their phone, or they can make sure that they are they leave their phone somewhere, they put it somewhere safe. The other thing is that obviously phones aren't allowed on all sites and in all places. So whilst it gives us an idea of where someone is, if it's in a locker or a safe space, you would then hope and think that someone's in that terminal working, and you've got some control over it. So you have to be aware of the data challenge around it to a certain degree. Our second one is around the DSE and the MSDs. Those ones are wearable little accelerometers that you put on. The options are different when you're looking at what's happening on the quayside and rope handling. And that's because we're looking at a number of different positions. That includes wearables on your legs, your arms, your back. You're looking at twisting movements, you're looking at strains and stresses, and you need more sensors to be able to do that. Whereas for someone who's looking at DSE issues and being sat at a desk for a longer period, we actually only are using one on the back of the neck. It sits on your collar. It can tell you whether you're sat straight up, whether you're sat forwards, whether you're moving regularly, whether you're getting up from your space. So it depends a little on what you're using it for. And then the final one is around stress. It's a watch. So people are wearing those. Again, we've got those geo fenced, so we're not picking up anything outside of somebody's work area. It's a little bit different because you can obviously use those in a lot of those areas where you couldn't have a phone, or people might not want to use phones. But that's picking up heart rate. It's the difference in the heart rate. I can never quite remember what it's called, but it's the way it beats and the speed it beats. And then it's picking up the location that you're at and also the time. And by combining that with other information around the job, we can then make sort of further assumptions, build further expectations around what those challenges might be. And we've got air quality sensors in, we've got the job itself in terms of if you're sat at the gates, have you got a heavy load of vehicles coming in and out, or is it a job where you've got additional traffic moving and you're looking at ship movements and where they are and what they're doing at that time. So picking up different data, by combining it with further data, you can then get additional learning. But it's really, really important to make sure that we are not picking up anything that's going to be personal that people don't want to share. And we're trying to make sure that we don't encroach into any areas that will have GDPR or personal identifiable information that becomes a risk to us or the people within the trial.
I think it's really interesting because a key part of physical health, which links to mental health, is also inclusivity, making sure that you're taking in all of the organizational roles within the sector is really interesting to hear, and how the technology sort of varies because of that as well. So
you've got to use the right technology for the right role. trying to put 3 or 4 sensors on someone at our gates, we're not going to see much. There's an additional cost, there's additional data that we have to then clean and sort and organize. So that's not going to benefit. Whereas actually having an idea of what these can be used for beforehand, designing a good trial, rolling it out in the right way, is absolutely critical.
Right, thank you. And how did you decide which roles or workers would be involved in this initiative?
Again, slightly different ideas in terms of who's doing what and which trial is going on. With the phones and geolocation on site, we're trying to make sure that we have an idea of where we've got people. That gives us an opportunity to deconflict anybody who may be working in a particular area. If we've got issues, we can send vehicles elsewhere. The lone working piece is important for our teams. Contractors on site just don't have the same awareness as our team, so being able to see where they are, if they're starting to get lost, if someone's gone into an area they shouldn't be, it provides security as well as safety. Meanwhile, on the MSD side, we wanted to look at some of our highest risk areas, and the highest risk areas relate to those musculoskeletal diseases, or disorders, sorry. And that's that twisting, that's that heavy pulling. It's really complex trying to do a risk assessment for rope handling in terms of the MSD side. And that's just because it's so dynamic and you're pulling so many different directions, heights, levels, weights. So having this information really supports us with that. And then the stress one, everyone's got different stresses. Our pilots are wearing some, our duty port operations managers are wearing some, we've got some in the control room, we've got some at the freight gates, we've got some that are going to hopefully be going to some of the machinery workers and operators on site as well. And their jobs differ, but we've got to understand how that affects people. That could be shifts, that could be time related, it could be that they're having to make decisions on the hop, it could be the stress of dealing with customers and passengers, or it could just be that you've had a really long shift, it's the end of your shift, and we need to look at how sleep hygiene, food hygiene, all the other pieces are working.
Great, thank you. And what sort of steps did you take prior to rolling out these pieces of technology to engage with workers?
Yeah, 100%. It's a really important piece of it. We have a really good open relationship with our team on site and also unions on site. I think they understand that when we are doing anything like this, we are trying to do it for the right reasons. So that relationship's been built up over years. It doesn't just happen. They've got to understand why we're doing it. So there's been a lot of discussion, both informal, but also slightly more formal. We've had the product designers come in and talk about it and given opportunities for people to come and see what happens, how it happens, what data is used and why we use it and how we mask it and keep it separate. And then, fortunately, we respond and check in to the team to try and make sure that they are seeing the benefit. They're able to give us any background information around what's going right, what's going wrong. And we just support that trial. And hopefully we will be able to share dashboards information with them at the end, which again, because they've seen us do it with other programs in the past, they know that there will be some feedback and they'll be able to learn from it as well.
It's great. I think that particularly with something like this, having that sort of communication, that trust, a lot across the teams is very important. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Communication's key on these. Yeah, it's very easy, particularly with wearables, for teams to feel that they're being watched or spied upon. It's a common theme that you hear when people first mention that sort of thing. You know, people will freely give away all of their data and information to Google and Apple and everyone else. You know, we wouldn't know where the traffic issues are. But when it comes down to work conditions, people get concerned and worried about being, you know, overly managed and watched and everything else. But you've got to have that trust and communication with the teams so that they know what we're looking at. And equally, as a management team and organization, we've got to be willing to look at what bad things we might find. You know, this isn't necessarily going to demonstrate that everything's rosy. So if we pull things up that aren't right and we have to redesign, or there's a cost, or we have to change shift patterns, you know, we've got to be open to that as well. So there's got to be buy-in at both ends of the spectrum for this to work properly.
Great, thank you. And speaking of, did you find that there were any concerns or challenges around privacy or surveillance, or any challenges in general implementing this sort of initiative?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, data collection, data use, how you combine data, it's got so many controls on it now that you need to make sure that there's a lot of protection in place. So all of these organizations have a DPIA in place with us. We've got NDAs in place, not to hide the information, not to sort of do anything untoward, but to make sure that that information is protected, and we've got support both ways around making sure that that's protected. Communication's key, and giving people the opportunity to ask those hard questions. You know, we do see it with our teams. You know, what's this about? Why are you tracking? What are we doing? And it's something that by doing trials, you learn more and more about every time. You know, geofencing is a brilliant way of stepping that back, but you also find you're explaining GDPR at times, and the restrictions and regulations around that. You know, safety and security are key parts of what we do in ports. And actually, sometimes we're too risk adverse around collecting data because it goes in the too hard pile. So we've really had to design and work around that. But as I say, fortunately, we've got really good relationships with our teams, trust, communication, collaboration, giving them the opportunity, and understanding how they can pull out and away from these trials if they have any risks or concerns that come to mind is also critical.
Yeah, I think with data such as physical health, it's a bit more personal. So I guess especially if you're in work conditions, it can be sort of broached as a sensitive topic. So having a open culture, ensuring that communication on being able to ask questions and explain why it's being implemented is really important, and having that trust, as you say. Um, so how is the data going to be used, do you think?
So in terms of the way data's coming in, that is being collected by the companies that we're working with. We know where that data is being stored. We have an understanding of what they're doing to protect the data, and you know, how they're dealing with that data. And then we will see dashboards that relate to the information. The way that they're being designed is so that we cannot see exactly who it is unless someone has volunteered to be, you know, identified. Um, with the phones, we can see where your phone is. We can't see where you are. So that's critical, and people can turn that off. They're also given the option not to do it. Contractors, we've got a little bit more focus on, and that's for their own safety. So we will start to push that further and further. But in terms of the other wearables, it's all been very much voluntary based. And we are starting to see videos match up with stress lines, and then we've got experts looking at the MSD and better ways of handling and giving expert advice. So, once you start feeding that back into the teams, they start to understand the value and benefit of this.
Amazing. Okay, that is that section complete. Thank you so much. I
No
will
worries.
stop the recording.